welcome to the Witch in the Woods, and today I want to discuss the story of Lughnasadh and its associations with the Sun God Lugh. Now, when I say that Lugh is a sun god, this is somewhat of a modern assumption, and really, Lugh only became associated with such Roman and Greek deities as Apollo sometime around about the Victorian era. So if you look online, you will see quite a lot of articles that will say Lugh is a god associated with sunlight and vitality. But the truth is that this is not necessarily his attributes. We associate him with this because of his appearance this time of year and his celebration at the festival of Lughnasadh, where we presume that we are celebrating the heat of the sun and the height of the summer, as well as the harvest. But there is some etymology that suggests that Lugh is not actually a sun god, but a storm god, and that he's more likely to be associated with lightning and with sort of force and dynamic. He's actually a trickster god. He could also be associated with Mercury, and the reason for this is that Mercury is the god of trade and communication and the arts, and Lugh is in fact skilled of many arts. Now, this association came from a Celtic god that was mentioned by Julius Caesar, although he did not give the name for this god, but he did say that it was the most revered god in the Celtic lands and that he was the father of all arts. And so there is a possibility that Lugh is in fact this god of artistry and trade and communication and merchants. So what we know of Lugh is that he has many epithets. He is called Lugh Lamfarder, or Lugh of the long hand, and this may be an association with his magical spear. He is called Ildanach, which means skilled in many arts, and Samildanach, which means equally skilled in all the arts. He's also called Lonbeimnech, which means fierce striker, Machnia, which is youthful warrior or hero, and here he may be associated with the Welsh god Mabon. And he is also associated with hounds, and his epithet is also Conmach, which means hound son. Now, there's some association with three Lughs, and these three Lughs have a hound totem. He could also have three sons, so it would seem that Lugh is in fact a triple god. He is the father of Cuchulainn, and so his own son is associated with hounds. So this is very important that he is also associated with hound totems, and these hero warriors were often associated with these hound totems. He's also associated with a magical horse that can ride over land and over water, a magical boat which is called Wave Sweeper, and many magical items such as his magical spear, which I will come to later. So we look at the etymology of Lugh, which is a little uncertain, but we've got a few ideas of what they could be. So it could be that it comes from, and it used to be thought that it comes from, the Proto-Indo-European word Luke or Luke, which meant flashing light or lightning. And this was later disputed because there is no evidence of the K sound turning into a Celtic G sound, and so this etymology has now been dismissed. It could also be associated with a Proto-Indo-European root word, Lugh, which means, I can't say these things, sorry, which means to bind by oath. And he was also called the babbler. So it would seem that there may be some oath making that would actually tie him to sacred kingship. And so there is some association with acts of swearing oaths, of making vows, and of keeping your words, and giving your reference to some kind of kingly figure. And so that may be a derivation of this name Lugh. Now, nobody has actually brought this up, but I would also say that there is some similarity to the Latin word lux, lugh, which is of course Latin for light, as in fiat lux, let there be light. And so, although this is not recognised in an academic sense, I would just like to throw out there that there is a similarity between the word lux and lugh. Anyway, so there is no real definitive answer of where his name comes from. Now, it would seem there was a possible connection between Lugh and Loki, and this I will come on to later, but there are many similarities between these two names as well. He's often described in terms of a sun god, though. He is described as a man fair and tall with a great head of curly yellow hair. He has a green mantle wrapped about him and a brooch of white silver in the mantle over his breast. Next to his white skin he wears a tunic of royal satin with red gold insertion reaching to his knees. He carries a black shield with a hard boss of white bronze. In his hand a 5-pointed spear, and next to it a forked javelin. Wonderful is the play and sport and diversion that he makes with these weapons. But none accosts him, and he accosts none, as if no one could see him. He's also associated with the rising sun or the setting sun. So in The Fate of the Children of Turin, Bres says, "It is wonderful to me," he said, "that the sun is to rise in the west today, and in the east every other day." "It would be better that it were so," said the Druids. "What else can it be?" said he. "It is the radiance of the face of Lugh of the long arm," said they. And so it's definitely an association with sun and with sunlight and bright light. But I don't think this is his only association, and to call him a sun god disputes quite a lot of other attributes that he has, and one of these is lightning and thunder and as a storm god. So Lugh was born to Ethne, daughter of Balor, and he was a Fomorian. He has a son who is Cuchulainn, who is later, I can never say that, Cuchulainn, who is a later hero of Irish myth and associated with hounds, of course. So the most famous story about Lugh is how he travels to the court of Nuada, who is the king of the Tuatha De Danann. But he will not be let into the court unless he can offer a skill that is of use to the king. And so he asks the doorkeeper whether he could offer his services as a right. But the doorkeeper says, no, sorry, we have one of those. He says, can I offer you my services as a smith? And the doorkeeper says, no, I'm afraid we have a smith. He offers himself as a champion, as a swordsman, as a harpist, as a hero, as a poet, as a historian, as a sorcerer, as a craftsman. And each time the doorkeeper replies, I'm sorry, we have one of those. But finally Lugh asks, do you have anyone who can do all of these things? At which the doorkeeper had to concede that they did not have a person who could do all of these arts. And so he was let into the court of Nuada, and he actually became the greatest Ollum, the great chief bard, druidic Ollum of Ireland, for his talents, for having all of these skills. And so one attribute of Lugh is that he is skilled in all of the arts. And so this is a part of his attribute as a god of Mercury, of communication as well. So now that he is joined with Nuada, he helps the king in many, many battles. So unfortunately, Nuada is finally killed in the second battle of Mag Tuireath, and he is killed by Balor. So it is then that Lugh confronts Balor, who is a monstrous being who has a single eye that can kill people just by him looking at them with his evil eye. And of course this is very similar to the story of Goliath, who was a giant who had one eye in the middle of his forehead. Let's not talk about all the historic giants. There are giants, of course, that have sight problems, and this is maybe where this myth comes from, because it's on the same gene as your eye. Did I explain that well? I don't know. There is giants, they do have problems with eyesight. Anyway, so the story plays out that Lugh actually kills Balor by slinging a shot at Balor's eye, and thus defeating this evil and terrible and poisonous being, which of course is very similar to David and Goliath. So he wins over at the Battle of Mag Tuireath, and later on during this battle he finds Bres, who was a Fomorian but became the leader of the Tuatha De Danann. I have done a video on this, so I will link it here. And Bres pleads for his life on the battlefield. Now it is said that Bres pleaded that if they spared his life, he promised that he would ensure that all the cows of Ireland always gave milk. But the Tuatha De Danann turned this offer down. He then promised that he would give the Irish 4 harvests a year, but the Tuatha De Danann replied that 1 harvest a year was sufficient for them. But then Lugh stepped in and spares his life on the condition that it is Bres who teaches the Tuatha De Danann how and when to plough, sow and reap a harvest. And so this is his association with agriculture, with the harvest and with abundance, and so it's definitely links him to this time of year, to the festival of Lughnasadh, which I will come on to. This defeat of Balor by Lugh is a very prominent feature in the mythology of Lugh, and also links us to the death of Baldr by Loki. Now, Lugh often appears as a trickster god, and it is said that in County Mayo, thunderstorms were named as battles between Lugh and Balor. So the idea is that he strikes Balor with a, well, this this time it's a slingshot, but also he's very famous for having a spear. And so there's some differentiation between these two objects, but the action is the same. Now, bringing up Lugh's spear has a name of Yew, and it is a magical spear, and it says in the Liber Gabala Erin that there is an incantation that when he throws the spear, Yew, it casts it out and it hits its mark. It also returns to its owner if you say the incantation Ryu. So the incantations are Ibar, or Yew, and Atibar, Ryu, come back, and this causes the spear to return. In a 17th century or pre-17th century account, the spear is named Ariver or Ariber, and it was said that it belonged to the king of Persia, and its tip had to be kept in a pot of water to stop it from igniting property. Now this may lead some of us to think of the lightning strikes that may happen in August. In Britain it is a time of thunderstorms, often releasing lightning and also causing fires if the ground is dry. And as we know from recent history, if there is not a lot of rain, we could lose a harvest to fires. And so there's this association with Lugh too, and perhaps with lightning strikes. The association of his spear to a yew also ties him into the myth of Loki and Baldr, who of course was killed by a yew dart. His spear is the famous yew of the wood, which would associate him to the druidic idea of sacred woods and their magical properties. Now, the saving of the harvest at this time of year is celebrated in the games of Celtu and the celebration of Lughnasadh itself, which actually carries on even into the modern times. And this is celebrated as a defeat of the evil powers of the other world, who would like to steal the harvest from mankind, but is saved and returned to mankind by the act of this sun god or storm god Lugh. And so his is a victory or triumph over darkness to bring in the bountiful abundance of nature and of all our efforts to mankind at this time. These games of Lughnasadh were definitely games of physical prowess and strength. They were games of horse racing and of fighting and of heroic warriorship. And it's said that Lugh invented horse racing, and so he's very much tied to the horse and to this noble pursuit even now of horse racing. As we consider it in Britain, we still respect this pursuit. It is the sport of kings. And so these games are displays of physical prowess, displays of warriorship and displays of kingship. So Lugh was a very important god to the Celts, and many places were named after him. There was Louth, the county of Louth in Ireland, which is named, was originally named Lughnasadh or Lume or Lughnasadh. Lughnasadh. I cannot speak Irish, I do apologise. There is of course Lyon in France is named after Lugh, and here in Britain we have amongst others Carlisle, which is named Carlugh, or the Castle of Lugh. And so he was a very important kingly deity associated with sovereignty over the land, and of course associated with abundance and prosperity and the harvest the fruitfulness of the earth at this time of year. As I say, he was associated with many magical items. The spear, the boat, his magical horse and magical boats, and of course a lot of associations with his hounds, and his own hound was called Feilinnas. And like many god warrior kings, he was associated with the totem of a dog or a hound. So there's just something to think about when it comes to the god Lugh, and of course his association with Loki and with this original myth of killing Balor, who is a one-eyed giant in Irish mythology, or Baldr, who is a beautiful god in Norse mythology. So there's some dispute there between this character of Balor and Baldr and exactly what he represents. So I'll leave that with you to ponder, and I hope that you found this some use and some pertinence when it comes to this time of year in ways of thinking about who Lugh is and what these ancient myths actually evoke in us, and actually an understanding they can bring us of the natural cycles of the season, and our own use of this myth in our own practices and our own psyches, really. So I hope you found that of some use. If you did, please like and subscribe and share and blah blah blah. Thank you for watching. Hope to speak to you all again soon. Cheers. Bye.